What if an AI could think more like us? I mean, not just spitting out answers, but actually being able to stop, reflect, and question its own thinking. Well, it turns out some researchers have just built a framework that does exactly that. And honestly, it might just solve one of the biggest, most annoying problems in AI today.
So let's just dive right into the core issue with all these incredible AI models we're using. It really all boils down to trust. See, they know a mind-boggling amount of stuff, but they also have this really weird habit of, well, just making things up. You've probably heard of it. It's called hallucination.
I bet we've all been there, right? You ask for a specific fact, maybe a historical date or a book recommendation, and the AI gives you this answer that sounds so plausible, so confident, but it's completely, utterly wrong. It's a huge barrier if we ever want to rely on these things for serious, critical tasks.
And look, this isn't just something we've noticed anecdotally. As the researchers behind this new framework point out in their paper, it's a well-documented, fundamental problem. Even with all that data they're trained on, large language models just have this built-in tendency to invent facts out of thin air.
So to try and fix this, researchers came up with a pretty brilliant idea called Retrieval-Augmented Generation, or RAG for short. The concept is actually super simple. Instead of just relying on the AI's faulty internal memory, why not give it an external library, like Wikipedia or a database, to look things up before it answers? Give it a library card. Now, this whole library card approach works in a couple of ways. You've got your standard RAG, which does a quick, one-time search. But then for more complicated questions, there's multi-time RAG, which is clever enough to go back to the library multiple times to piece together an answer. It was definitely an improvement, but as researchers soon found out, simply giving the AI more books to read doesn't solve the whole problem. Turns out there was a much deeper flaw. Even with a library, these models were still making basic mistakes. And why? Because they were just following a rigid, predefined script. They had no way of realizing, hey, I don't actually have enough info here, or wait a minute, my internal knowledge completely clashes with what I just read. They just couldn't see the flaws in their own logic. They completely lacked self-awareness.
And this is where the big breakthrough really comes into play. Researchers decided to give AI a very human superpower. It's this ability to think about thinking. It's a concept from cognitive psychology that, honestly, you and I use every single day without even realizing it.
That superpower is called metacognition. It's that inner voice, the one that kicks in and asks, wait a second, does that really make sense? Or, am I actually sure I know this? It's our amazing ability to self-reflect, spot our own mistakes, and then change our strategy to get it right. And this diagram just illustrates the core idea perfectly. On the left, you see the human process, how we think, and then reflect, and then self-correct. The researchers literally mapped that exact same feedback loop onto an AI, creating the framework you see on the right. And this new system, they call it MetaRAG. Okay, so how does MetaRAG actually work? How does it manage to think twice before giving you an answer? Well, it all comes down to this really elegant three-step introspective process. First, it monitors its own initial answer. It basically asks itself, is this good enough? If there's any doubt at all, it kicks into step 2, evaluating. Here, it tries to diagnose the specific reason it might have gone wrong. And finally, it moves to planning, where it creates a custom strategy to fix that exact problem, and then tries the whole thing again. Now, what's so cool here is how it evaluates its own thinking. It uses two kinds of knowledge, just like we do. Procedural knowledge is all about the what. Do I have the right facts from my memory and from the library? But then there's declarative knowledge, which is about the how. It looks for flaws in its own reasoning, like spotting when it jumped to a conclusion too quickly or when an answer is redundant. So based on that self-evaluation, the AI creates a very specific plan. If it realizes it doesn't have enough information, it doesn't just give up. It generates a brand new, more specific search query. If its own knowledge conflicts with what it found in a document, it has to actually decide which source to trust. And if it catches a logic error, it goes back and double-checks every single step it took.
But of course, the big question is, does all this work? Does giving an AI an inner critic actually make it smarter? Well, the researchers put MetaRAG to the test against other top models, and yeah, the results are pretty stunning.
This chart says it all, really. In every single scenario, whether there wasn't enough information, the information was conflicting, or even when there was plenty of info but the reasoning was just tricky, MetaRAG is way more accurate. I mean, look at that huge jump in performance when the knowledge is conflicting or sufficient. That proves it's not just better at finding facts, it's actually better at thinking.
And just to be clear, we are not talking about a small, minor tweak here. On these really challenging datasets, MetaRAG boosted performance by nearly 35% over the next best model. That is a massive, massive leap forward in making these things reliable.
So this research really opens the door to a fascinating future. We're starting to see a shift from AI that just executes commands to AI that might actually possess a form of self-awareness. An AI that doesn't just answer, but understands the limits of its own knowledge and can actively work to get better.
And that really leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. An AI with an inner critic is obviously a more trustworthy, more capable tool, but if we can teach a machine to question its own reasoning, to have just enough doubt to seek a deeper truth, where does that road lead? What else can it learn to question? That, right there, is a whole new frontier.